Hi guys. Ignore the weird position we are in. And my cup of tea here. I keep losing my voice, and I have to film a bunch today, so that's fun. Also, if the lighting changes, we are currently under storm warnings, so I can't control the weather. But anyway, today we are going to be discussing How to Start Christian in College by Jay Brazerwick? I don't know. Reading that every time I think it has to be like a Harry Potter professor. But this book is a doozy. If I'm looking over here, by the way, I am looking at my notes, which you can see the edge of. I'm so out of practice of this. It isn't even funny. But anyway, let's talk about this book. So I read this book about a month ago, and it has sat with me in the worst way possible. This book is terrible. I can't really sugarcoat it other than that. The chapter on politics is actually pretty decent. But ultimately, it's just an unusable book. There's a lot of things about this that I deeply question. For instance, the fact that here on the cover, I'll be showing you a better image here, there's a claim that over 300,000 copies have been sold. But when I look this book up online, I can't find any evidence of that at all. I can't find any news articles. I can't find it on the New York Times or the USA Today bestseller lists. And I can just about guarantee with those sale numbers, it would be on those lists. Granted, I'm currently only in the writing process of my first novel and nowhere near the publishing process. But even I know those kinds of sale numbers for nonfiction in general, unless you are a former president, a former Prince of England, or anything else under the sun like that, it's just not going to be those kinds of numbers. So this book is claiming that it has sold as many copies more than, actually, Obama's memoir, which I find highly questionable. I just don't think that something like that would happen, and I can basically guarantee it would not happen without press. There is no press. There's no Christian press. There's no, other than a handful of blogs written several years ago, there really is about nothing about this book online. There's no social media following. There aren't videos about it. There aren't talks about it. It is just not something that is in the lexicon. It is not something that is in the common knowledge. Not even a couple of years ago is it there. And again, being nonfiction, being Christian nonfiction, if this had sold 300,000 copies, even over the span of 40 to 50 years, it would have made news. Think of something like Mere Christianity by not Tolkien. Wow. Like Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. That has sold billions and billions and billions of copies and is very well renowned. I can find scholarly articles, blog posts, video essays, secular sources, all discussing this as a rite of working, as a book, an English nonfiction work, as a religious piece, as a thought of Tolkien's thought process. Tolkien, why do I have Tolkien on the brain? As a thought of C.S. Lewis's thought process. I can find dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of articles upon that. Again, this is even a big number for fiction. Typically, fiction sells around a couple thousand copies, a couple 100,000, and you're a bestseller. And that's fiction. Fiction sells better, does more, typically has a longer lifespan than nonfiction, largely because a lot of nonfiction ends up running out its lifetime because certain things run out of date as information changes and as we gain more knowledge. Think of computer books. Those tend to be already out of date by the time they hit store shelves. That being said, books like this that are basic advice things or basic principles of how to, be a successful student shouldn't change over 10 to 20 years. And if it is a holy grail or an evergreen product, I should have heard about it. And I've grown up in the church. I've been surrounded by it. I'm going to a Christian university. And I only found this because I specifically Googled books for Christians going to college. That is the only way I discovered this book. I had never heard of it. I had never seen it. I had never seen it on social media. I had never seen it on Goodreads. I had never seen this book discussed anywhere. At all. In any capacity. And for it to claim 300 million copies. 300,000 copies? I think it's 300,000 copies. Have been sold. Means that it should have multiple translations. It should have like a foothold within Christian American iconography. Again, think of C.S. Lewis. Think of the Chronicles of Narnia. Even think of something like the Christy Miller series. All of these things have much more of a hold within Christian circles than this book. Again, that's claiming that it sold more than, as far as I can tell, the entirety of the Christy Miller series in like 20 years, which is remarkable that a book like that is still in print. This feels like a vanity piece. It's largely generic and not in a typical, like, nonfiction self-help book kind of way, but in a be as generic as humanly possible kind of way. At points, it feels like it's ghostwritten by multiple authors, which would be totally fine. You could write something like this and have multiple professors at one university or several universities write a different chapter on each thing. It would give students much more perspective. It would give future students a lot more depth to look into, to understand what is coming forward, information and sources from all. But largely, this is coming from one person who claims that he's a pastor and a professor, who doesn't cite sources, who doesn't document evidence, who doesn't do really any of the things that a professor would do. Now, I hound on that a lot in my written review because, again, he claims to be a professor. He teaches students to do this, and yet he won't do it in his own work, and a publisher backed him on it, which is probably the scariest portion of this. And then we get into the apologetics. This book is the kind of book that wants to think that the God's Not Dead franchise is realistic. It's not. No part. And by the way, there's a whole section in that chapter that's like, people in your class will just think that you're terrible and they will alienate you because you are standing up for what you believe. No, they're not. I'm going to be very, very frank on that. If you do that and you're that asshole, people aren't mad at you because you're a Christian. People don't give anything. They don't care. And your professor, I'm pretty sure, doesn't care either. But they do care. That you are being the disruptive asshole that is preventing everyone else in class from learning, and you're trying to bring petty, not well thought out arguments to class, and you deserve to get a bad grade for that, because you aren't actually doing the work of class. Again, you can drop the class, you can take another science class. You don't have to take that class. Specifically, you're doing this, people are at you because you are being an asshole. There is a massive difference betwixt the two. In one case, let's say you are in a class where the teacher tries to attack you for being a Christian, take it to the dean of students. If you are specifically being targeted, because you wear a cross necklace or because of something else, and it will be very obvious that it is exceptionally different. It won't be because you're having outbursts in class or you aren't writing something that is per the scope of an assignment you've been given, and you are being persecuted for that or for anything else. Take it to the dean of students. It is their job to protect you in this case. If you need to drop a class and take something else, do it. But don't be the asshole. God's Not Dead is not a realistic franchise. By any means. Sorry, Ivy's in here. By any means. By any measure. God's Not Dead is not a realistic franchise. And expecting it to be a realistic franchise is a part of the problem here. Because books like this, I can guarantee, think of stuff like that as a realistic project. I wouldn't even be shocked if he was like a technical advisor on those movies. And by the way, I've spoken with other Christian people that really like them, and for the most part, people look at them as fun, ridiculous nonsense. Kind of similar to the way a lot of people look at Indiana Jones or Star Wars or Star Trek, anything like that. Like, it's just fun fantasy nonsense. They don't look at it as realistic. So that's a little helpful in my faith in humanity. But I'm worried about the handful of people that do. Because obviously, those people exist. Because here's a book that proves it. You check my notes and make sure I've said everything I wanted to. So, oh yeah, okay. So, also, additionally into the 300,000 copies that have been sold for this, like I said, I couldn't find a single piece of press on it. I really looked. I scoured the internet. I just couldn't find it, and I can guarantee you there would have been press. There would have been a book tour. Okay? That's that kind of big deal nonsense situation kind of thing. Like, there's a book tour if you sell this kind of copies. Just FYI. And furthermore, on Goodreads, this does have even smaller impact on Storygraph, but on Goodreads it has, and let me go ahead and quote directly from my notes because I want to make sure that I'm reading this correctly. It has a less than 2% reader rating on Goodreads, so that means less than 2% of the massive reading population of Goodreads has read and rated this book. Even less people have it on their want-to-read list, although I didn't write those statistics down. I do apologize for that. It gets even worse when you look at the numbers of ratings and reviews. There are only 400 ratings for this book. That means people that posted a rating, but not a review. So only 400 people have rated this book. Okay, keep that in mind. And then it gets even worse when we get into the reviews. There are only 60, now 61, reviews for this book on Goodreads, a platform designed for book readers. The numbers are even worse on Storygraph. I think they're half of what they are on Goodreads, which does make sense because not only does the Storygraph audience, from what I understand, skew more liberal, it also is much more tiny. It's growing in popularity. I do like, and I used both for different reasons, but yeah, it is largely lower rated over there as well. Now, granted, with those 60 reviews, it does hold a very high average star rating of 4 stars. That is kind of terrible, though, because it makes me question whether the positive reviews are genuine or not, because of such a low number. Again, I read a lot. Y'all know. I have a channel that is basically become a book channel these days, and I read a ton. And I read a lot of indie stuff too. I have Kindle Unlimited. I read a lot of that. I read a lot of paranormal stuff for my paranormal channel. I read a lot of niche stuff for this channel. And this is by far one of the worst, average rating situations I have ever seen. I read some weird niche stuff. Okay? It is not uncommon, especially in the paranormal stuff that I read, when it's especially on Kindle Unlimited, not dogging Kindle Unlimited for this, for me to be the first person or one of a handful of people to rate something on Goodreads. And I've actually had to input a couple of things into Storygraph. For instance, I just read the Christian Girl's Survival Guide to College or something like that. I'll link it down below. And significantly better than this. It's free for Kindle Unlimited readers. It is better formatted, better structured, better written, and quite frankly, it gives more solid advice. And it's free if you have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, and it's only $2.99 if you don't. I question those numbers significantly. I honestly wonder if this was bought for conferences or schools and given out to students, because those kinds of numbers and the data I can find don't line up. Something is fishy here. I don't know what, and I'm not saying anything specific, but what I do know is these things don't line up, and it doesn't make any sense to me. Something is fishy. Something doesn't line up. 300,000 copies being sold, no press. Either they're lying about their numbers directly, or there's something more sinister going on here. What? I don't know. But yeah, I had never heard about this book before. I'd never seen this book before. I had never seen this book discussed anywhere before. So let me know if you have. Let me know if you've seen articles about it. Actual, real news articles. I mean, this would have been in the New York Times. It's that kind of numbers. But it wasn't. So let me know. Anyway, that's all for this week. And I will see you guys next one. Bye. And,